Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. Notices announcing the date, time, and place for this meeting were sent to all concerned individuals, associations, and sent to Union County Local Source in accordance with Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. For the roll call, Ms. Primack?
Here.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Justice?
Here.
Ms. Cohn?
Here.
Mr. Cho?
Here.
Vice President Colon?
Here.
President Bonner?
Here.
You have a quorum, and the meeting is yours, sir.
Excellent. Thanks for coming. Happy New Year, everyone. We have a presentation on the Fall 2021 Start Strong Assessment Data from the Director of Education, Jennifer McCann.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight. Back in the fall, our students in grades 4 through 10 were administered the Start Strong assessment in the areas of ELA and math, as well as in science in grades 6 through 9 and 12. The Start Strong assessments were given this past fall instead of in the spring. We normally assess our students with the NJSLA assessments, but given the pandemic, the state postponed those assessments, but did require us to administer this new variation of Start Strong assessments in the fall, but this will only be for this school year. Our normal testing assessments will take place in the spring with NJSLA starting in March, actually. The Start Strong assessments were designed to inform instruction by providing our teachers, administrators, and you as parents on an early indication of the level of support students needed as they entered this school year. The assessments assess students on a subset of priority standards from the prior school year. So for example, our 4th grade students' math test focused on 3rd grade NJSL standards in math. These tests were created to help our educators and families better understand what educational supports students would need. The results were provided to us in levels of supports needed. So students were identified as needing strong support, some support, or less support. And we used our results in order to identify curricular adjustments and targeted instruction for our students. The ELA assessment consisted of 10 to 11 questions and focused on reading literature and analyzing informational text in all grade levels. In grade 4, we had 59% of our students who needed less support across the district. In grade 5, we had across the district 73% of our students who required less support. And at the secondary level, we had more than 67% of our students at each grade level that was in need of less support. So, summary, we did really well on our diagnostic assessments in the areas of ELA across the district, and we were in really good shape in order to start this current school year. The mathematics assessment, depending on the grade level, ranged from 20 to 25 questions. In the area of elementary math, students were assessed on their knowledge of multiplication, division, fractions, measurement, and operation with fractions. Sorry. Our grade 4 students, we had 69% of our students district-wide who needed less support, and you can see from the graph, we range just about that within each of our schools across the district. In grade 5, we had 61% of our students who were going to require less support to start off the school year. And in middle school, we had about 60% of our students who were going to require less support, except for in grade 8. Now, the one thing to keep in mind in grade 8 is that we have our students that take grade 8 Algebra 1, and they fared very well, around the district average, or 6th grade average of just about over 60% of those students were in need of less support. So they're disaggregated out and the remaining students was about 34% of our 8th grade students who were going to require less support. At the high school level, we had 51% of our Algebra 1 students who required less support, 73% of our geometry students who required less support, and 84% of our Algebra 2 students who required less support moving into their math classes for this current school year. Our science assessment, they focused particularly on areas of physical science, as well as earth and science. Earth and space. And also, let me find it right here. I have too many pages of notes. And life science, I apologize. Our 6th grade students were at 47% needing less support, grade 9 students, 42% needing less support, and our grade 12 students, 55% needing less support across the district. Now, our next steps is we always, with whatever data we are doing, we continue to monitor student data. We look at our data from a district standpoint in order to make those curricular changes, and then our principals and our teachers look at it to determine what's needed in each particular grade level within their buildings or within a teacher's particular classroom. They make adjustments according to whatever units of study they're implementing, and we also provide students with additional supports, whether that be learning workshop or before or after school support classes as well. So we'll continue to revise those action plans that we put into place when we were given this data back in October after the students took the assessment, and we'll continue to adjust and monitor with our own internal assessments and compare that data as we move through the school year. Are there any questions? All right, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Now is the time where I say some stuff, and tonight it's some really good stuff. Happy New Year, everyone. And what a start it has been to 2022. I keep on this, it seems like it's already been several months, but I keep thinking back to those couple weeks in June we had last year. That was a good run, right? So it feels like many months since the schools started, and we've had some stops and starts, but we're back in, and kids are learning. You might not know this, but Students Helping Students has been running for 5 years in the high school. The club was initiated by a Summit student working on social justice project for her history class. She felt there was a need to have a space where students could talk about mental health challenges and provide resources and support to the student body and help fight the stigma surrounding mental illness. The Students Helping Students Club brings awareness surrounding mental health and offers activities in a stress-free, judgment-free environment for students to take a break and decompress. The club is open to all students and faculty. It runs a wide range of activities dedicated to and for the entire student body, which promotes positive mental health. The club is constantly evolving. It continues to assess the needs of the student body and focuses on providing experiences that connect the current trends and timely topics. Over the past 5 years, the club continues to grow in numbers and in the amount of time that they meet. The advisor, Student Assistance Counselor Amy Herber, and the Leadership Council, consisting of 5 students, are invested and committed to making a positive impact in the school community. Meetings are held every 2 weeks from September through the end of May. Each activity event meeting is deliberately planned and orchestrated to have meaningful and rewarding experiences for the students. Throughout the pandemic, the club continued to provide consistent programming while meeting virtually. This year proves that another impactful year with 44 students showing up to kick off the meeting, all looking for a space to be themselves and support each other, has been a good one. I hope that they were not too tired of Zoom by the time all 44 of them got on a screen for that meeting. The Student Helping Students school-wide initiatives, which have impacted the entire student body, have included their Shoes exhibit, You Are Not Alone campaign, It Starts With Hello campaign, Kindness Challenge during the month of October, highlighting a week of respect, 13 Reasons Why Not, discussion, and a display. Meetings have included activities such as positive messaging rock painting, and I've seen those, distress with your pet, sharing ideas for managing stress, pumpkin painting and carving, developing a gratitude wall, plus discussions on managing unhealthy relationships, self-love, goals, and intention building. These young folks got a lot on their plate there. Guest speakers have included local therapists to discuss managing family stress during the holidays, relaxing techniques, yoga, and stress reduction, mediation, and they most recently held a sand therapy session. One speaker felt compelled to share her experience with Principal Grimaldi about after visiting the Students Helping Students Club. The students were so incredibly respectful, intelligent, and kind and professional to me as a guest. The one situation that stood out to me was the interaction of the leaders of the club with other Summit High School students. I noticed students who may have had difficulties in social situations being supported with compassion and kindness by the leaders of this club and Miss Herbert. Truthfully, I had to hold back tears. That is how palatable the kindness was in the interactions. Being a trauma therapist, I know the long-term impact of compassion on those struggling. It makes a lasting impression. I visit many schools in Union, Morris, Somerset, and Bergen County, and I have to say that Summit stood out to me. We have said all along in this pandemic that kids are resilient and they will find a way to help each other. Sometimes we need to get out of their way and just support them through it. Thank you to all the students who are out there looking out for each other and your peers. I am very proud of all of you have been through. You will come out stronger for it. And with that, I turn it over to Mr. Huss.
Well said, President Bonner. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to begin my report by thanking everyone in the community for their patience and support. All the school staff and parents have continued to work tirelessly to keep, in the face of Omicron surge, to keep our schools open and our students learning. I received numerous emails from parents in the community thanking the teachers, the staff, the administration for working so hard on behalf of their children. Thank you, parents, for your support and recognizing how hard our teachers, nurses, and everyone in the school community is working to keep our schools open and our kids thriving. I need to personally thank the administrative team, and everyone needs to know that they have been working around the clock, nights, weekends, to make sure our doors stay open. They navigate very difficult task of putting the pieces of the puzzle together to build schedules from staff shortages, answering higher volume of phone calls and emails, and making sure all the health and safety protocols maintained, and of course, changing the Department of Health guidance along the way, and then finally, providing an excellent education that's commensurate with the expectations of this district. They've all been working tirelessly on that front. So I really thank them, and we could not do this without them. I want to recognize one individual in particular for her remarkable efforts over the last 3 weeks. Ms. Doreen Babbis, Director of Special Services. She oversees the nursing department, and the board needs to know that she's also the liaison to the Department of Health, that she has been working tirelessly through the winter break, weekends, evenings. She hasn't complained. She's answered every phone call I've given her, and I've given her plenty at all hours of the day and night. And she doesn't quit. She cares about this community, and she's very, very dedicated, and we would not be in the position we are without all of her efforts. So thank you, Doreen. The bad news is that sounds like a speech we would give when we're through something, and we're not, so we just have to get right back at it again tomorrow because we're still in the thick of it. All right, thank you. So the first week back from break is not without challenges. We had some unexpected weather and some significant delays in our testing results. So once again, I want to thank everyone who participated in our testing day for their patience. When we finally got the results, I sent them out earlier this week. And the final results were as follows. We tested over 1,000 people. They test 8 samples together in one pool, and they retest each pool of the 8 samples that yield a positive result. Approximately 66% of our testing pools of 8 were positive. And that meant we had 145 individuals that tested positive, which is about 14% of everyone that tested. And that was in my communication earlier this week that we sent out. I just wanted to reiterate those numbers. I've recently been asked about the number of individuals who tested positive that were vaccinated versus those who were not. As we know, Summit is a highly vaccinated community, and we certainly have been hit hard by the Omicron virus, resulting in positive cases regardless of individual vaccination status. I want to recognize that some believe our quarantine protocol should reflect this trend. However, as you know, we do follow during the pandemic from the start all the way till now. We've relied on the CDC and the Department of Health to provide us with guidance that helps keep our community open and our children safe. But we will continue to engage conversations with the Department of Health about implementing guidance that balances the need to keep all of our students in school in the safest manner possible. As you know, I released the new isolation and quarantine guidance from the Department of Health yesterday. The new guidelines reduces the number of days a student or staff member should stay at home for isolation or quarantine from 10 days to 5 days. This will clearly increase the number of days students are in school and help maintain a continuity of instruction. There are additional details associated with these new guidelines, so I encourage anyone who has to isolate or quarantine to speak with your school nurse about those details. As a district, we were preparing for this over the last couple of weeks prior to the release from the Department of Health. So I'm happy that we were able to put these new guidelines into effect immediately. We are now currently pursuing how to utilize the Test to Stay program to keep more students in school. This will allow unvaccinated individuals an opportunity to test if they were exposed to a positive case and stay in school if they are negative throughout the time that they would otherwise have to quarantine. We have discussed this with the Department of Health, and we will share more information as it becomes available. Shifting to school and student information. Olivia Lawler became the 17th Hilltopper out of boys and girls to score 1,000 points in her career. Congratulations. Great accomplishment. And our high school girls basketball coach, Tom Kenny, reached 300 career wins with the varsity's recent victory over Roseville Catholic. In collaborating with Overlook Hospital, primary center students are working to cheer up and demonstrate appreciation and gratitude for the first responders and staff by creating cards. Our young scholars learn that we are all part of the community and that we should demonstrate kindness and respect to all citizens. We recognize the sacrifice and dedication of the community workers, and this aligns nicely with some of our social studies lessons. There's a new initiative in Lincoln Hubbard. The Grade 5 Pride Pals had over 40 student volunteers take their time to make a difference through service. For their first endeavor, 5th graders, in just 6 days, organized a food drive for St. Teresa's Food Shelter, and they collected and donated 126 bags total in 6 days. Very impressive. And finally, I encourage everyone to take a moment to watch the video spot about our Unified program. Gary Pascal is a coach of the Unified basketball team, and he speaks about the history and the impact of the program. In the video, you also hear from a few students who are on the Unified basketball team. They speak about their experience with the Unified team and the importance of inclusion within the high school and the district as a whole. If you'd like to watch the video, it's on the homepage of the district website. Many thanks to Lorraine Callender, Communications Officer, for creating this video. She is very talented in this area and she does tremendous work. I really encourage everyone to take a look at the video. It's a really, really great example of how we celebrate and include everybody in our community. And that concludes my report.
Awesome. The Unified game is in my calendar. I think it's next week, right? We start? It's on there. I will absolutely be there. Thank you, Superintendent Huff. It is now time where we take a little bit of care of some business. Specifically, we need to approve the superintendent's report, which, if you're unfamiliar, usually includes an affirmation of a superintendent's decision for a harassment, intimidation, and bullying case or cases. Tonight we have none of those. We do need to approve the review of 3 HIB cases and then a few suspensions in Summit High School and Lawton C. Johnson. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Prior to the vote, is there any discussion on these items? Seeing none, roll call vote. Ms. Primack?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Ms. Cohn?
Yes.
Vice President Cologne?
Yes.
President Bonner?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, moving right along to committee reports. We had some stops and starts with some reports this week, so things got bunched up toward the end after we got back in school and everybody was able to have it, but I think we got them all in. And so I am proud to introduce Ms. Miller to talk about the Education Committee.
Education always gets it all in, no matter what, right? Right, my friends? Education meetings are typically very, very long, and this one was not, for once. So on January 6, 2022, at 3 p.m., we had a 30-minute meeting. That is unprecedented in my tenure with the board. With me were Superintendent Huff, Jennifer McCann, Crystal Marr, and Walida Justice. We discussed 3 things. First, because it was Thursday, the first day that we had transitioned to the necessary remote learning situation, we wanted to learn in real time what was happening with that shift, how temporary it would be, how teachers were doing, how students seemed to be doing. And so we discussed that, and the committee was satisfied that the transition had gone well, despite it being one that no one enjoyed having to make. And so we were pleased with that, and we are pleased with the fact that it was a temporary situation. We then went on to the Start Strong data, which is what Ms. McCann just presented. We reviewed that, which I will remind the board, we had already reviewed preliminarily in November. We did some preliminary work as a district in October. We never wait for the state to do anything for us. So we had done some preliminary work, and that is what you heard in November. Our preliminary work was found to be in line with what the state presented, and what you saw tonight was state information, or state-approved information. We also, Crystal Marr, Director of Student Personnel Services, reviewed the current K-12 ELL 3-year plan. The state requires that every 3 years we create and submit a plan. We, again, in anticipation of having to provide that plan to the state, had already done that in November. And this board and the public heard about the findings there. So all of that, it was relatively a do-over. We just made sure that the plan was ready to be submitted, and it looked okay. And all of that took only 30 minutes, I am happy to say. We will meet again on February 3rd at 3 p.m. And you will see that the district's 3-year ELL plan is in our agenda for approval tonight. Are you going to make it down there, Mel? You good? You need some water? Okay. Did I miss anything? Walida, or questions? All right. That's my down, dirty, and quick report.
Fantastic. Mr. Cologne, operations, all HVAC all the time these days.
Here we
it
go.
seems, huh?
We got a good one on HVAC today. Okay. The Operations Committee met on January 10th for a little over an hour, 65 minutes. In attendance, Derek Jess, who we welcomed into the meeting and who ran the meeting, Michael Martino, and Superintendent Huff, and board members, myself, Melanie Cohn, and Jan Cho. We briefly discussed the 22-23 budget and the budget process. More specifically, the process. We didn't review any numbers, but we were updated on steps being taken to manage the district's expenses for the upcoming school year, specifically with respect to healthcare costs, which is a hot button cost item for all districts in the state, and I would imagine the country at this point in time. Meetings with the current health benefits broker for the district, Brown & Brown, as well as the healthcare plan provider, Aetna, are being arranged to discuss the pricing for the coming year, and a draft RFP for brokerage services was provided to the committee for review. The committee expressed support for the work being performed and has offered to assist the business office and Mr. Jess in however he needs in order to mitigate a material increase in costs for the coming year. Facilities update, a few smaller items related to Brayton. The lintel repair work that has been discussed in this meeting in the past is substantively completed. I don't know if the punch list, Derek, has been finalized or not, but it was very small.
Yes, I received a confirmation from the architect that the punch list items have been taken care of.
Okay, so we're done. So we're satisfied with that work. Also, for the Brayton building, we confirmed that flood remediation steps, if you recall, that building flooded a few months back, certain parts of the building, lower levels, and so there are steps being taken to remediate the flooding risk going forward, and so that will occur in the coming months. The HVAC project, which President Bonner alluded to, for this building, the high school, the administration committed to a year-end timeline for defining the proposed scope for this work, and a proposal has been delivered and is up for vote in this meeting. Their proposal includes replacing all existing rooftop equipment, which, as a reminder, has reached end of life, as well as extending the HVAC system to all classrooms and the cafeteria for this building. And so an expansion of the HVAC effectively to the entire building with the exception of the 2 gyms. The contractor bid for the project is $3.826 million, which will be funded primarily from 2 ESSER grants, which are in total approximately $2.37 million, with the balance of the contractor bid being funded from the district's capital account, which is sufficiently funded for the balance of the project cost. The committee supports the proposed scope of work and was pleased with the process undertaken to achieve competitive pricing for the process, or for the project rather. The bid did come in below what was originally estimated for the project cost, so that was a good result. We then moved on to a nuanced topic of compensation, post-termination non-salary reduction benefits. The business office provided an update to the committee regarding a potential change in how certain post-employment payouts are made to former district employees. And the relevance of this is that this change would direct certain payouts to be made directly into 403B retirement accounts, resulting in a more efficient tax outcome for those employees as well as for the district. So it actually is a win-win, both sides. The business office has conducted due diligence and obtained tax and legal advice on this matter, and will be introducing the potential change to various employee groups, teachers, supervisors, principals, etc., within the district in the coming months, with the intent to implement the change this year. Another matter related to compensation and staff, substitute employee payments. To ensure that the district has sufficient substitute teaching staff on a day-to-day basis, the administration has proposed compensating substitute teachers who are prepared to work but not utilized due to remote learning adjustments, which occurred last Thursday and Friday, where we had to line up substitute teachers and then move to remote. The proposed pay rate is 50% of the substitute teacher pay rate. The committee supports this proposal for January 1st through the end of this school year, given the near-term demand and need for substitute teachers. And that item is up for vote in this meeting, along with the previously discussed project for the HVAC of this building. And those are the 2 items the committee is recommending. Committee members, Jan, Melanie, did I miss anything? Okay. Questions?
Do we know what other districts are doing about substitute teacher? Is this in keeping? with what other districts are doing? Are we doing this because,
Fair question.
you know,
Yeah.
we care extra?
Yeah, well,
Mostly because we care extra, and many of the subs that have been servicing our schools over the last year are regular subs.
Yeah.
And, in the event that they're blocking out time for us and the unforeseen occurs, like it did, we want to keep them. They're part of our staff. They're an integral part of our staff, and I think this is a good way to recognize that. And we certainly don't anticipate having to do it again, but it did occur this past week, so I think we wanted to take this opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should point out that we did discuss the financial impact of the district, which we determined to be minimal in the context of...
Past you.
I should have mentioned that. I should have mentioned that. Anything else from the full board?
I had a question that I think I know the answer to, but it's worth asking for the public, just to keep track of all the additional expenses that are related to the pandemic. And I guess, Derek, you've only been here a little while, but maybe you two can chime in. But I know at the beginning of the pandemic, the district had to shell out a little bit of its own cash to get us up and running, get the schools opening. And then all the grants started to come in from the state and the federal government. You've already alluded to the fact that we're able to use a grant to help with HVAC, which is part of air circulation and safety. What's the state of the state with regards to the district in continuing to have to incur these costs this year or moving forward? And what's the relationship between that and what we've been granted from the state or the federal government?
So, and Derek, you can chime in. We did not discuss, we're always, as a part of standing item for the meetings, ensuring that there isn't anything extraordinary happening in the current year's school budget. So there was nothing discussed with respect to extraordinary costs, COVID or otherwise, that would negatively impact our budget numbers for this current year. So that discussion we always have. We did not discuss the reconciliation of all of the ESSER and grant monies against all of the expense items that we were looking to fund. And so, Derek, I don't know if you have an update on that. Yeah, we know that has been a topic
Right.
In previous committees, but that we didn't discuss that specific item in the last committee meeting.
Right. I can tell you that with regards to safety measures for cleaning supplies, masks, plexiglass and things like that, the district has a surplus of those, so for the foreseeable future, we don't have to expend any funds on those. I'll also tell you with regards to the ESSER grants that there is a portion of the ESSER grants which is still not committed. So we do have some money, I don't know the exact figure, but we do have some dollar figures that could be used should the need arise again.
So it's safe to say if there is any impact, it will be negligible. And you might also say that because we're able to use some of the funds for things that we needed anyway, the district's probably going to make out on the plus side of all of this, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think, obviously, the administration and Lou prior to Derek have been careful with respect to, applying significant amounts of those grants against expenses, operating expenses, normal operating expenses of the district, because the district is limited in its ability to do that, given how the money can be used. And so I think it's safe to say that there's no expectation of a material impact, either positive or negative, from where we are right now and where the budget is.
I would agree with that, and the initial outlay of expense when this began, those grants did start coming in, which were allowed to be allocated to those items, whether it be filters, plexi, hand sanitizer, and the rest. So I agree with Mr. Cologne's assessment that I'm not sure we're going to be better off or worse off in the end. I think we're going to be right where we should be.
Thanks.
Michael, and Derek, what about the busing costs? I mean, it's not directly COVID, but obviously impacted by the economic environment caused by COVID. The transportation costs are up something, right?
Yeah.
Which can't be really covered by the grant.
No, I don't believe, and again, this was not, we discussed this, but not the specific negative item. And so as of December, it was my understanding that we were going to be able to absorb that increase in cost this year within the current budget. And so it's not going to break the budget and create a negative variance for us in the current year. And obviously, this is something that Derek is looking very closely at for the coming budget, because we all know that it is having an impact, and it's potentially material. I think there was either last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we talked about the cost, I think it was between $50,000 and $100,000 of potential negative impact annually to what's happening right now. So it's material.
And it's not only the cost, it's finding a driver like available. And then if you have someone available, they may or may not have a commercial driver's license with an S endorsement. And so it's, if anybody out there wants to drive a bus, you can drive one really quickly if you can get your commercial driver's license, because there is an extreme shortage.
That's right. And you don't need to do the under the hood test anymore.
That's right. New.
For the next 3 months only. That's the saving grace.
Which,
Get in there now.
Derek, to
This
his
is the
credit,
time.
that was an item in the meeting. I didn't think it reached the threshold of the minutes, but we discussed it.
No under the hood. We're grateful to the state of New Jersey for cutting that out.
They're always here to help.
Process, yeah. All right. Good update and good conversation about the operations and the business of running the district. Moving on to policy, Mr. Cho.
Yes, so the policy committee met on Monday, January 10th at 3:30 for approximately 45 minutes. In attendance were staff members Rob Bardella, Kathleen Murphy, and then board members Michael Colon, Melanie Cohn, and myself. There are some new policies and revisions and regulations I will quickly summarize and go over. The first is a new policy, 1648.14, Safety Plan for Healthcare Settings in School Buildings, COVID-19, which is a new policy mandated. The Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, along with the state level, passed some regulations with respect to workers to protect employees in healthcare settings, and New Jersey State Department of Labor and the Department of Education has stated that it does apply to healthcare settings in our school buildings, which is primarily the nurse's office. So the policy just outlines procedures to establish respect to like distancing, isolation and such to protect our healthcare staff, school nurses. Policy 5770, student right of privacy, is a revision in the existing policy that kind of reflects the actual procedures in place to the extent that there's a situation where a staff member has reasonable grounds that a search of a student and or their property is required to discover evidence of a violation of law or school policy. The search of the student and their potential contents, backpack, locker, or such, is to be conducted by the principal or designate, and if possible, in the presence of another staff member. And in the revision, such search does not require the consent or presence of a student, presence of a parent or guardian. We have a regulation that's been revised to reflect the existing previously approved policy. Regulation is 2464, gifted and talented students. And then the regulation is modified to reflect the policy that has previously been approved, and the primary change is the criteria for recognizing inclusion in a gifted and talented program. Previously, there was one criteria used for all grades, that the teaching staff evaluate students where if the student was advanced proficiency in one or more subjects, demonstrates academic performance 2 or more grade levels above their grade. The new standard breaks it out both for separate set of standards for elementary and then a different standard for secondary students. And I'll briefly summarize. At the elementary level, are students in the top 15% of their grade level within their respective elementary school, has standardized test scores demonstrating above grade level on the COGAT. Test performance indicates they've mastered the content and shows characteristics of gifted students. At the secondary level, it's again slightly different. Standardized test scores demonstrating being above grade level, mastery of the performance, and behavioral characteristics of gifted students. Another regulation, 5350, a revision, is still student suicide prevention. Again, this is a revised regulation for a previously approved policy on the issue, and the revision adds a requirement that for cases where a student has been removed from school based on the situation and such that the student wants to be readmitted, that if requested by the district, the relevant medical records should be made available to the district, and that the superintendent has the final say in terms of decision on return to school after evaluation of all the relevant information. And then a new regulation, 5350A, which is actually a related topic, is student risk assessment. This is a regulation to assist staff in recognizing the warning signs that a student is exhibiting signs of self-harm and harm to others. The regulation details the warning signs and the training for the staff to make a preliminary assessment recommendation, which potentially could include the removal of the student from school and requirements for professional care. So for the committee recommendations would be the first reading of the new and revised policies and regulations as stated. And our next meeting will be Monday, February 7th at 3:30 p.m. Melanie, Michael, anything to add?
It's thorough.
Any questions from the rest of the board?
No, sir.
We have no second readings, right?
No, we have no second readings. That's correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cho. Moving on, Ms. Primack, Communications.
Thank you. So the Communications Committee was supposed to meet on the 5th, which was snow, sleet, ice day. We moved it to the 10th. Thanks to everyone on the committee for quickly finding another time and date. In addition to myself, I had President Bonner, Ms. Justice, Ms. Callender, Mr. Orr, and Superintendent Huff. We met for approximately 35 minutes. Our first topic was COVID-19 communication, sort of, from the district about sort of what's happening internally at the district, such as pivoting to the remote and, the communications from prior to the break about the change with the testing day and the single sessions. Really, there was a tremendous amount of positive feedback from many members of the community. I certainly received quite a bit. Really just very pleased with the communications, the context for the decision-making, really just understanding kind of what was going on in order to make it what was particularly noteworthy was that I actually had people who both sort of agreed with certain decisions that were being made and some who were not, but that's not why they reached out. It was because they just really appreciated that understanding of the why. And I don't actually recall somebody, it's been a long time, I think, since someone said, I didn't necessarily agree, but I really appreciated what I received, the information being shared with me. So I don't remember the last time you got one of those. And then I may say, this was on Monday that we met, those sentiments were expressed by many and more again after your Tuesday communication. Just really that, really appreciation for providing that lens, that context, that understanding, and feeling just that there was a lot of transparency behind why things were happening when. And again, people really, I've gotten so much tremendous feedback about that. It's been overwhelming. And so, as I think we noted in the meeting, we're not, in putting these very challenging times in this situation aside, we're not always going to agree on many things, but just people understanding what is going on from the superintendent's perspective, the administration perspective, the district perspective. People just really, they find it incredibly meaningful and helpful. So that was wonderful. We discussed briefly the website outage. I know Ms. Callender has taken care of making sure that the community knows about that. Initially, it seemed as though it was going to be a very short-term situation. that, after a couple of days of hearing that, it wasn't. So just making sure that everyone knows the company has, however, been in constant communication with the district about the various stages and updates. And if I may ask, so now, we're here, where is it now? Is it?
It seems to be fully restored.
Okay, so as of right now, but we do understand that it was frustrating because there were some key items that really were not restored, such as the dashboard for a while and whatnot, but by now everything should be restored. And thank you to Ms. Callender and everyone for making sure that people sort of knew what was going on. And we had a very brief overview of the projects. Really, again, the Summit Scoop has been getting tremendously positive feedback. All of the end-of-year communications, very well done, very well received. I did see the video, by the way, on Unified Sports. It's just wonderful. So please take a moment. It's just fantastic. So very wonderful. And looking forward to highlighting some of the clubs and activities. You heard President Bonner mention student helping students, and really just looking at these impactful and positive efforts that are going on every day, and really celebrating them because they should be celebrated. As for community buzz, all I got is all Omicron all the time at this point. I think it really kind of, just kind of, wow, the tsunami of Omicron. So again, we don't have any recommendations. We're meeting again on the 27th, just with, time off and holidays that's going to be, and I think that will be timely because obviously, the communications are key, but again, I think, again, people really do feel a sense of connection with what's going on and why. Anything from my fellow committee members? Anything, any questions, comments, feedback? Nope. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Primack. Negotiations, it feels like 6 months ago when we had our last board meeting. So I can't remember if I said this, but I know I said that we came to an agreement with our principals with regards to the 3-year contract. I remember signing that, so I think that's a done deal. What I can't remember if I did mention is that our agreement with the principals resulted in a more favorable outcome for the Summit supervisors. So we've made that adjustment since then. And so that's a done deal too as well, right?
Yeah, we're in the process of finalizing that.
Okay, I think if we have to, the committee has to probably sign something there too, right?
Correct.
Okay, but it's on the way. So that's the big piece of news, is that our agreement with the principals resulted in a more favorable outcome for the supervisors. So that is the report on negotiations. Liaison reports. Did anyone liaise since we met last? Unlikely in December. December is not a heavy liaise month. Okay, excellent. All right, moving on. Before I do public comment, I'd like to introduce Derek Jess, sitting in the hot seat for the first time with Summit Public Schools. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Derek has one important job and then another important job that he doesn't know about that I'm about to tell him. Derek provides me notes so I don't mess up the meeting, which is critical. And then what Derek doesn't know is that part of being the school business administrator, board secretary, is that Doug Orr set up an algorithm now that all emails that have the keywords pandemic, isolation, quarantine, vaccine automatically go to your inbox.
Those emails have been quarantined to a separate email address. Unfortunately, I have not been able to get to.
So I'm going to sign that approval tonight, so tomorrow you'll be, I just need you to be ready for that.
Thank you, I'll be ready.
All right, awesome. More importantly, Mr. Jess has some additions and some revisions before we get to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everybody. This evening we have 5 additions and 2 revisions, and they are as follows. Additions under personnel. Item C, number 4, approval of the following changes of assignment. Number 4, Nicole Castronuevo, from part-time inclusion aide at Franklin Elementary School to full-time inclusion aide, Step 3 aid guide, $38,619 prorated, effective January 4, 2022, for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. Item D, approval to appoint the following support staff substitutes pending criminal history review, background checks as required by law. Item number 2, Shelley Lemos, clerical substitute, $13 an hour, effective January 10th, 2022. Item number 3, Mary Driscoll, school nurse substitute, $225 per hour, effective January 14th, 2022. Item L, approval of the following 2021-2022 salary adjustments due to advanced degrees earned for the following staff members, effective February 1, 2022. Elizabeth Guella, Master's, Step 8. Item S, approval of the co-curricular stipend change for Literacy Magazine, Lawton C. Johnson Summit Middle School, 75% for Elizabeth Guella and 25% for Ashley Raven. Item T, approval to appoint the following substitute teachers pending criminal history review, background checks as required by law, and the ability to obtain New Jersey substitute teacher credentials. Robert Fitzpatrick, $100 per day, effective January 14th, 2022. The revisions. Revision number 1, under operations, item K. The amount of the funds that we are receiving for the donation of our battered music equipment is increasing from $200 to $500. And I'd like to thank Karen Forgione for spearheading that, because she was the force behind having those funds increased. And personnel, item C2, changing the effective date to January 19th, 2022, changing the number of overlap days to 2, and adding an overlap day of January 18th, 2022. And I would ask all the board members to please consider moving those under the respective areas this evening.
Will do. Okay. It is now time for public comment. Mr. Jess,
Thank you, Mr. President.
you have
Good
the
evening.
ground rules.
Anyone wishing to speak shall first seek recognition by the presiding officer. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address in a clear, audible tone for the record. All comments should be directed to the board president and not an individual member of the board. Unless additional time is granted by the board president, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. In addition, please note that this portion of the meeting is for public comment and not meant to be a back and forth. Board members and administration will not respond to questions or comments at this time. However, information will be provided as soon as possible. Mr. President?
Thank you, sir. All right, letter A, public comment for items on the agenda. No one wants to talk about HVAC or nothing? It's ridiculous, Cologne. Disappointing. All right, moving on. Public comment for items not on the agenda. Mike is there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa DeVries. I live at 153 Maple Street in Summit, New Jersey. First of all, I want to thank you all for the extraordinary steps you've taken over the last week to get our children back in school. We're extremely grateful for that. Sorry, I'm only supposed to be talking to Mr. Huff. So,
Actually, Mr. President, but it's okay. We're all here.
okay.
Not that formal.
So I appreciated one of the comments earlier about the why. Like, let's be transparent and help everyone understand the why behind why we make the decisions we make. So I'll just take a minute, because I think it's often misrepresented, of the why behind someone who has chosen not to vaccinate her children. The why is very real. I'm totally going off my notes, but it's real to parents. It's real to parents who have been diagnosed. I can't even talk. My children have a hereditary link to ARVD, which is a deadly heart condition caused by the large right ventricle. It's concerning when I hear people call me selfish, call me uneducated, tell me that I'm putting people at risk by the decisions I've made with my children. I think it's become apparent over the last 10 months
that whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you still get COVID. I'm not going to underscore the importance of this vaccine. It's why I begged my mother and father to get the vaccine. They are at risk. They have real risk of getting very, very sick. I believe in the vaccine. I worked for 15 years for a pharmaceutical company. I sold and marketed and directed vaccines. I believe in them. But I also believe in the parents' right to make a choice for their child based on their own individual risk factors. And knowing my children, all 3 of them are genetic predisposition to have an enlarged right ventricle, and to give them something that has a 1 in 1,000 to 2,000 chance of getting myocarditis, it's real. And so when I see commercials that say, it's safe, it is safe for majority of the people, but not for everyone. And so I ask you to take a look at something from my perspective. If you want to know the why, this is the why. If you can look at Dr. Robert Malone, I sent a video to Mr. Huff. He was one of the lead scientists who created the mRNA technology. He is a vaxxer. That's what he does. He believes in immunology, vaccines. He spent his whole life researching them. I ask you to take a look at the video. I'm going to warn you, it's long. It's 50 minutes. I know we're all busy. I know you guys are working around the clock to do what you can do for our children.
Excuse me, Ms. DeVeers, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. President, she's at the 3-minute mark. Would you like to extend more time?
Okay, I'll wrap it up quickly.
Please.
I ask you to take a look at that video and see the why from a concerned parent. There are risks, and there are individual children that are predisposed when the risk of Omicron, because this is different than Delta, this is different than SARS-CoV-1 that came out 2 years ago. The risks are minimal, and I just ask that my child be able to learn the same way other children, in person, with a teacher. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments? Sir?
Thanks. Mike Curran, 15 DeBerry, here in Summit. It's more of a point of clarification. I'd gotten an email forwarded me a couple days ago regarding the test results, and I might be interpreting it wrong or heard it wrong, but I thought people were saying it was trending at like 50% positivity, which was absolutely alarming on the, from the test day. And I thought someone said tonight it was 14%. Is that right?
The individual positivity rate for individuals was 14%. They test in pools of 8 originally. They test 8 samples in one pool, and of the pools is how they first diagnosed the positivity rate, and that's how they communicated that it was trending high, and our actual pooling results were at 66%.
But the end result was
14% of individuals.
individuals?
Yes, correct, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So I've explained this a lot over the past, so I'll take the moment, and since we have folks listening in, it's important, and it may not come out when you read it, because if you don't do it every day, it can get a little bit confusing. The way most labs handle COVID-19 analysis is that they pool the tests. So originally, at the beginning of the pandemic, a company like Miramis, which I work with as well, would take 24 individual samples, and they would test them all at once. So they put them in a tray, and it goes into the machine, the little pipettes come down, they take it out, and they bring it over, and they test all 24. If all 24 are not detected for COVID, they throw that batch away. That is at the time, it was a cost saving and a speed measure to get the results back as quickly as possible, because as we know, and as we saw, when we don't get results in a timely fashion, it can have negative impacts. So at the worst part of the pandemic, which was basically like a week ago with regards to getting testing done, what they had to do, because they were seeing so many pools come back positive, pools of 24, they had to reduce their exposure to those pools, because what happens is that when you test a pool of 24, comes back negative, we throw it away. If that pool comes back positive, they have to go back in and then they test 12 more times in pairs. And so 2 samples go together, and then those samples get tested in pairs. Again, time-saving, cost-saving measure. And then if those 2 are positive, then either those 2 individuals get a link to say, we need to go in to figure out if you're the one, or they reflex them down to the 1. So what had happened a week ago is that because 24 was too much, they needed to reduce their exposure, they reduced them down to 8. And so what Miriam has told, not only the district, but us where I work and many other schools that use it, is that the pools were trending at 50% positive. So what that means appreciably, if you do the math, that means 1 out of every 2 pools of 8 was coming up positive. So you could think about it, 1 out of 16. And I think that math is 6.25%. At a minimum, you would get positive samples, right? So it's kind of an apples and oranges things. Yes, it was spelled out in the letter that Superintendent Huff sent out, but if you're not familiar with it, I understand how it can get confusing. So what we did and other schools did when we heard that, we did the math and extrapolated that percentage, that 50% pool positivity rate, across an entire spectrum of a district. So we made some predictions to say, okay, if you have 1,000 kids at 6.5%, right, you're going to get
We were higher than that. Yeah.
60, right?
Much higher than that.
Some kids, right? We ended up being a lot higher than that, actually almost triple what they told us that day. So it turns out that what they told us was an underestimation of what actually happened here in Summit. So I'm sorry to bore you with all that. I've explained that like 18 times this week alone, but I felt it was important based on what your question was, sir, so everybody understands that, number one, that's how it works, and number two, there's no intent to deceive there. It's about the language that you use, and at the end of the day, the final result was 3 times worse than they told everyone that day, and so the district made that decision. If that doesn't help, email me and we'll have another conversation about how it works in detail. So I apologize for that. I wanted to take a moment to make sure that that got out there. I think it is important. The nomenclature is important. The details are important to understand. And it's very critical to understand that, like, we are not in the business of fear mongering. That is not what we do. We want to be as factual and accurate as we possibly can. So forgive me and thank you for allowing me to take that. My 3 minutes are up, right? So I ceded back another minute to myself. Sir, did you have a follow-up?
No, it's okay.
You're good? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Haley Telling. I live at 215 Oak Ridge Avenue. And I just have a question regarding the mask policy. Obviously, Governor Murphy extended his mask mandate throughout the state against the New Jersey State Legislators' recommendations. I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to stop wearing the mask? Now, I know that obviously he, executed his power to do that, but when can we push back eventually to say, our children have been wearing masks for 2 years, it is affecting their mental health, they are the least at-risk population, and they're sitting in schools having to wear these all day long. I mean, I'm sitting here wearing this right now, and it's not comfortable. They're wearing them for a long time, 6.5 hours a day, and they have to sit on certain dots at times for snack time because they can't, talk and eat and have a normal social childhood. The adults that we're supposedly protecting are all out having dinner at restaurants. The children after school, they're playing sports without masks on, they're having play dates. So it seems sort of like a bit of a farce that we're continuing this when we know that outside they're all not wearing masks and they're not getting COVID any more than they would be in school. So I'm just hoping that if this continues, that everyone thinks of a plan of how we can push back against this because, you know, how long are we going to do this? 4 years? 3 years? I mean, this has been 2 years. So we hope that, I think a lot of people in the community hope that, you know, you guys are listening to us and that you will represent us and push back. I know that you pushed back against the New Jersey Department of, I believe it was Health or Education, to lower the quarantine, which was wonderful that you were getting involved with that, so thank you. And I'm just wondering when we can start pushing back about other topics such as masks. Thank you.
Did you state your name and address? I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, you
Haley
did.
Telling,
Yes.
215 Oak Ridge Avenue.
Thank you. Missed that, but want to get that for the record. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Ann. Melinda Fleissner. I live in Oakland Place. Sorry, you can't hear me through the masks, to your point. You know, I speak for you almost every month, and I email all of you, and I appreciate the phone calls and the meetings, and I appreciate, as I say every time, to the extent that you guys have gone, the lengths you've gone to keep our children in schools to the extent that they've been. And I'm very hopeful that at some point we can stop being grateful that our kids are in schools and recognize that our kids deserve to be in schools, and it shouldn't be something that you have to work so hard to keep them in, or we have to work so hard to keep them in. At some point, and I think that was your point as well, this has become endemic, and whether, and even the WHO and the CDC is beginning to recognize that and beginning to move that way, and the quarantine lowering, I think, is a piece of that. But I think we're really penalizing our children. And I think that the fact that we're quarantining in our community, which has such a high percentage of vaccinated population, the fact that we're still quarantining unvaccinated children and not vaccinated children, which, believe me, I'm not advocating for any quarantine for any child. But I think that we're doing a disservice, and it's becoming a discriminatory practice that I think we have to watch the way that there's language around it, what's happening in schools, how children are being asked if they're vaccinated. I think it's becoming a divisive piece of our community, and I don't want our community to go that way. I think, to your point earlier when we spoke, Superintendent, that our community has rallied around each other to keep children in school to the extent that they have. And I think that what we need to do now is take a very honest look at who we're quarantining and how it's happening. My children have been quarantined because of an exposure from a vaccinated person. Some of my children are vaccinated, some are not. My unvaccinated children have been quarantined based on an exposure from a vaccinated child with COVID. It sort of is mind-boggling when you kind of think about it. That kind of defies logic to everybody. But their vaccinated neighbor at the same table was not quarantined. And my vaccinated son came home from college. Him and all of his vaccinated friends were COVID positive. I mean, I know that some of this is out of your hands, and I know, Superintendent Huff, that you've mentioned you're going to be looking at this, but I think it's a very easy thing for us to keep track of. Which of our students that we're quarantining are vaccinated? Which of our students testing positive have been vaccinated? I mean, when my children get quarantined, they always say, if you vaccinated them since our last conversation, they can stay in school, right? So they know we are tracking on some level who's vaccinated, who's not. So I think that's an easy one to look at. I think whatever we can do to acknowledge that this is endemic to our school, to our communities, and I know that we're beholden to the state. We've taken money from them. We have guidelines we have to follow from the governor. We have the New Jersey Board of Health we have to deal with. But I think there are mandates and there are guidelines. Masks are mandated in schools. Some of the rest of it is not necessarily a mandate that we have to follow to the letter. So I think we should walk up to that line, as I've said before, and do everything we can, short of crossing it, to keep every child in our district in school, in person, all the time. And I know, Superintendent Huff, that you're looking into test to stay, which I very much appreciate, and I know you're looking into keeping as many children as we can in schools. But I think that we as adults have to realize that we've asked our children to bear an enormous load that they shouldn't have to. Children are not as affected by this. We all know this, and most of them have had it. I mean, most of our community has had this now. I mean, Omicron is everywhere. We can't stop it. We're never going to stop this, but what we can do is stop the madness of me taking my 3-year-old to school, and she's in tears because she doesn't want to put a mask on. And it's not just my 3-year-old. My 3rd grader hates it. My 4th grader has asthma, can't breathe in them. I mean, it can go on, right? And then the mental health that we know this because our district has surveyed mental health, so we know how desperate our children, particularly our teenage girls, are, the mental health problem. I know my time is almost done.
Yeah, it is.
It's gone past. I've run past every time, I'm sorry. I know, it's why I have calls and emails.
I'll let you wrap up, because I think we have a call tomorrow, right?
We do.
You can finish.
We do. I know, I'm sorry.
I'll extend time tomorrow. How about that?
Okay. But I just think that whatever we can do, and I know that you guys are doing everything that you can think of, but I think we as adults, and I'm including you guys in that, and all of our community needs to do more for our children. And whatever we can do to keep our kids in school, all of our children, regardless of status, we need to do it. And I think it's time, it's well past time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, public comment is closed. Thank you for everybody to come to the mic. I know it's not easy to stand up there publicly with the camera behind you and give us your opinion. So I appreciate it. We all, as a board, appreciate it. So it says right here, remainder of the meeting, and we are ahead of schedule, which I love greatly. And we need to approve some board minutes, and we have a new system by which we approve board minutes because Mr. Jess knows how it's done. So I still need a motion and a second, and then we're gonna go from there. So I need a motion for the approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion prior to the vote? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Well, this guy already shaved off 30 seconds. All right, school board operation. We have items A through, no addendum on operations, if I remember correctly.
Correct, just the change,
Just the
the
changes.
revision to item K.
That you already articulated, so A through L. Can I get a motion? School board operations.
Move. Second. Prior to the vote, any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Primack?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Ms. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Vice President Cologne?
Yes.
President Bonner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. All right, so we have we're on to personnel. So we have the changes to, we have the additions to C, to D, to L, and then we have the additions of S and T. Does that account for all of it?
And the revision to item C, number 2.
C2 revision. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion prior to the vote?
If I may, I'll just offer up some congratulations to those who earned advanced degrees while teaching during this time. I think that deserves a little bit of extra acknowledgement on that one, so just point that out.
No doubt, well played.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Primack?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Ms. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Vice President Cologne?
Yes.
President Bonner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Policies and regulations, we only have first readings tonight. Can I get a motion? The left side of the table is leading in motions and seconds.
So moved.
Second.
Balanced it out?
Any discussion prior to the vote? Seeing none. Ms. Primack?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Ms. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Vice President Cologne?
Yes.
President Bonner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Finance. Keep the lights on and the heat on. Can I get a motion?
Move it. Second.
Any discussion prior to the vote? Seeing none. Ms. Primack?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Ms. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Cho?
Yes.
Vice President Cologne?
Yes.
President Bonner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. We do have a need for a closed session. So Mr. Jess will read out the ground rules there, and if you want to stick around, we'll be back eventually.
The Summit Board of Education may hold an executive session to discuss appropriate matters. Closed session minutes will be reviewed periodically to determine the appropriateness of their release. There may or may not be action taken as a result of this session, and the purpose of this executive session is to discuss a personnel matter. We need a motion. May I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
Second.
Is there any discussion prior to the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved at 8:15.
Well-oiled machine.